Welcome back to Fort Apache on Capitol Hill. We're live. It's Friday, the 20th of March, the year of our Lord 2020, and what a week it has been. This is history. You're living history in real time. An apocryphal saying, and I think it's attributed to either Lenin or Marx, so I know the audience is going to love this. Sometimes you have decades where nothing happens, and then you have weeks where decades happen. This is the times you're living in. These are weeks, the decades of events are crammed into time, and that's one of the reasons you need Kevin Hassett back into the White House, because the pressure, it's 24 hours a day at the highest level. Every decision you make could go one way or the other, and that's why you need to augment the guys in the White House, the men and women in the White House, with as many quality people as possible. We have breaking news. I want to go back because I'm bringing in a very special guest to talk about this, Brian Kolfage, who's the chairman and the leader and the founder of We Build the Wall. Brian is the specialist in the wall. We built, 4.5 miles with Tommy Fisher in El Paso, Texas, down the Rio Grande Valley, on the river itself. He's out raising money all the time to help President Trump augment, to build more private wall down there. But here's what Brian Kolfage is. Besides being the most wounded airman to live, he's an American patriot. He's dedicated his life to this country. We have talked for weeks about this issue of the southern border. And this is not racist or nativist. This is to help people on both sides. And this is why I was so proud of Guatemala when Guatemala said, hey, I think we have to close the border to the guys in the United States because we're not so sure you're on top of things. And we said, Guatemala, amen, brother. you hunker down, lock down. We appreciate it. That's what nationalism is. And we were the first to admit. Jason, go back. There's been breaking news before we bring Brian in. Breaking news about the southern border.
Yeah, so Acting Secretary, DHS Secretary Chad Wolf, on with Maria this morning, said, and if there's one or two words, it's an unverified transcript, but it's been confirmed we're closing the southern border. He told Maria, again, it'll be non-essential travel across land ports of entries. We want to make sure this is not about closing border. This is keeping border open, making sure trade and commerce continue. We hope to have similar measures in place today on the southern border, as well as a number of other measures. We're working with Canadians, Mexicans, on what people are increasingly concerned about. So DHS Acting Secretary Chad Wolf making it very clear that the U.S. and Mexico border will be temporarily closed to non-essential travel. President Trump and President AMLO are speaking later today about this. So we now have a closed border with both Canada and with Mexico.
Hashtag War Room Pandemic is how you get to us. We want your part of the show. The hashtag is blowing up, but we want your comments, observation. We put other polls up today. So, Brian, I know you've talked to the president on many occasions. You're very close to people around the president, including members of the family who are really very pro, doing something to make sure we have total security and sovereignty in this country. If you had a chance to brief the president before he got on the phone today with the president of Mexico, what advice, since you're an expert about the southern border, what advice would you give him right now for what you think he ought to be doing?
Well, I would tell him that, this border needs to be locked down as he's doing, and we need more border security. We need this wall built because this is, like you're saying, this is a tell to what could happen in the future again. And if we're not prepared, it's just going to get worse. And we have millions of people, American citizens, who live near this border, big cities like El Paso, Tucson. And, it just takes one person to come across and infect this population, and these cities are going to get destroyed, as we're seeing in New York right now. And there's pictures coming out from Border Patrol agents today who are masked up, dealing with Chinese nationals coming across. And it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with protecting the American people and protecting our citizens. And it starts with border security. It's something that we've been promised for the last 30, 40 years. And it's overdue. We need the wall. We need to get it built.
This is not, as we said, this is about the Chinese Communist Party, not about the Chinese citizens. The people in China are fighting for their freedom. And I can fully understand why they take the first flight and get to Mexico or get to Central America and try to work their way up across the border. It's absolutely a human it's a human need, or it's for human survival. We understand that. But it's about the sovereignty of the country. It's about the safety of the citizens. And we'll work this out as the CCP gets taken down. We will work this out, and the Chinese people will have their freedom. Brian, Bill Ackman was on the other day. He's one of President Obama's biggest supporters, huge progressive, one of the most successful hedge fund managers in the country. And on CNBC, he kind of a little bit had a breakdown. But what he said is that we have to close the southern border today. And he just about came out to say, you got to build a wall. you've dedicated your life, having given basically everything you could possibly given to defend our country over in the Middle East. Okay, you've come back and dedicated your life to the building of the wall. Walk us through, how important is it building the wall? How important has it been the 4.5 miles you and Tommy Fisher have gotten up in the Rio Grande Valley in El Paso? How important has it been? What results do we have? And how important is it to continue on with this project?
Well, I think most people don't realize how bad it is, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I actually got, my wheelchair on the ground down there and saw how bad it was. And most people wouldn't think that, 4.5 miles does much. But when you listen to the Border Patrol agents and you build exactly what they want and how they want it, it works, and it works to help. And just 4.5 miles we built has stopped millions and millions of dollars worth of drugs from coming in every single day. And that's why DHS Acting Secretary Chad Wolf fully endorsed what we're doing and said it impacted the entire region of El Paso. And that was just a half-mile wall in El Paso that we built. So imagine if we secured our entire border. And I think common sense will prevail on this over time as people realize that it is a national security issue. We need to secure our borders. All countries secure their borders in Europe and other nations. And Democrats for years have been supporting border walls in foreign nations, but they were completely against it in the United States. And now we're seeing just exactly why it's important to have it. We need to control our country. We need to control who comes in and out. And it's not about being anti-immigrant or pro or whatever. It's not about that. It's about knowing who's coming into our country, having control and checks and accountability, and funneling people to the proper port of entries to enter. I mean, just like when someone flies on an airplane, they have to go through the port of entry. We see their name. We know who they are. That's fine. And that we need to have that same control on our borders.
Brian, how do people get more access to the site, to you, your Twitter? It's always a lively Twitter feed. So how do people get more? We've had Cortez and Gorka and Bowling on today, kind of the hitters of the Trump movement. I want to make sure people get access to yours because you're another one that folks are lighting up all the time.
Yeah, you can follow me on it's my name, Brian Kolfage, on Twitter. It's all one word. Or on Instagram, I'm trying to reach out to the younger population. It's Brian_Kolfage. And, you can find us at WeBuildTheWall.us. You can check out exactly what the walls are we're building. We have live cameras streaming 24/7, overviewing our walls that private citizens have paid for. And it's a great thing what We Build the Wall is doing because we're helping our Border Patrol agents. It's the American people coming together to secure our nation, circumventing the government and all the red tape, and they can have a direct impact to secure these borders today.
Brian, thank you very much for joining us today on War and Pandemic. I look forward to having you back on the show. Brian Kolfage, an American hero. Full disclosure, I'm chairman of the advisory board, and I got to tell you, it's one of the things I'm most honored to do. When Brian and those guys had a little problem with the fundraising group, they wanted to give the money back. We got them here at the Breitbart Embassy. I said, Brian, why don't you just go build the wall? Don't give the money to the Treasury because the Treasury won't designate it. By law, they don't have to. It just goes in to pay down the national debt. I said, why don't you go build what the American people want to see is go build a wall. And Brian Kolfage did it. More breaking news. I know stuff's happening 24/7 here.
Stuff's just coming at us so fast and so furious. I do want to, on a lighter note, Steve, some folks are wondering what a schmendrick was, and so I looked it up. It is Yiddish for a stupid and ineffectual nobody. And also, in previous times, we've had folks ask when I've used the term jabroni, which is a dumbass or a loser, made famous by the Iron Sheik. He used to, back in wrestling, he used to always call people jabronis. Steve, the hashtag War Room Pandemic is blowing up. People are chiming in from all over the world, asking questions. Chef Joe 22, someone who recently lost their job.
Is this Chef Joe that lost the job?
Yeah, lost the job. And a really good question I want to ask both Jack and you to weigh in here. I said, War and Pandemic, excellent show. Do wonder what are the chances of what all we have left in our 401ks to allow us to access our money with no penalties. Penalties should be waived. What do you think?
Jack?
Well, I think that the penalties should be waived. The other thing that I think is very interesting, we got contacted yesterday by some people in Pennsylvania, and as the governor shut down the entire state saying that only life-saving things could be open, obviously food, medicine, things like that, they had to shut down brokerage firms across the state, and there were people saying that they were being told by their brokerages, sorry, man, there's no one there. We have no access to do anything for you. Now, this is probably not the first tier guys, but the smaller guys are really getting hit.
No, I think so let's deal with here's the only thing I would tell Chef Joe. I think in a macro, when they look at it on a macro basis, number one, it should be waived. I don't think and people should be given access. However, I do think when they're running the numbers at the Treasury, okay, and when Kevin Hassard, everybody's going to sit there and go, everybody's going to dump, right? So you've got all you talk about right now. Look, I couldn't get to Cortez. Cortez disagrees totally with John Childs. One of the things we try to do on the show is bring the smartest guys in the world here. John Childs, one of the top venture capitalists, came out last week with said, hey, Treasury ought to start getting credit lines up $1 trillion to back stock funds so that you prop up, you have an underpinning for the stock market so it doesn't keep collapsing and you're not wiping out the pension funds. Chef Joe, I know when you look at your 401k, you're looking at your 401k, seeing it melted down. Hey, I need access to pay things, and I'd like to waive the penalty. In aggregate, when they're doing that analysis, they understand that the efforts of 5 million Chef Joes are going to be dump it, right?
Right.
And that's going to put incredible pressure.
Essentially, you pocket the tax cost.
But it's not just the tax. My point is, forget the cash back to Treasury or cash to you, because he's right. We want to put more cash in people's pockets immediately. It's the pressure on the market, because and you're going to get to a point where you're not going to have anybody on the other side of the trade. Who's going to be buying when the 401k start dumping? It's like, hey, where's the bid on the other side?
And I think, I think it's good that, and obviously we're not your formal financial advisor, so people want to go and deal with people on that. But as we talk about kind of these broader national trends, this is where people are. I mean, this is where people are who've lost their job, who are looking at these numbers. And Steve, I do want to talk about, there have been some scary projections about what the unemployment numbers look like. I mean, there were economists that were coming out today saying that the numbers, I mean, we saw that, 187,000
out of Pennsylvania.
Out of Pennsylvania, just out of Pennsylvania. We saw one report today saying 1.5 million just next week.
Okay, my number, and I don't like to do projections. I'm just giving you the back of the envelope. And, I worked on Wall Street, had my own firm for 20 or 30 years. I'm kind of out of that business, but I still, keep my hand in a little bit. My number is 2.45 million. I'm telling you right now. That's my number next week, 2.45 million. It's a big number. Jason Trennert, one of the smartest guys on Wall Street. We've had him on the show a number of times. Jason actually came out and countered. We always like to get all the voices. He countered what Mnuchin said. He doesn't think we're going to Great Depression type numbers. He does think there's going to be enormous pressure on employment and things have to happen right away. I think you're seeing a consensus of what I would say is the non-political apparatus here. The political apparatus, I still think, and this is why Bolling's voice and Cortez's voice is so important, and Trenner's voice and others, you have to think unconventionally about this. There's still too much conventional thinking. Even this package up here, and you see, this is why Mnuchin's saying the first check's going to come in April. They're saying these are tax deferments. They're saying that's inside the box. President Trump's an outside-the-box guy. I think more voices got to be talking to him. What we need right now is an immediate cash infusion into this country. And Bolling and Cortez give you two ways. Number one, the federal government doesn't take any money in right now at all. None. Zero. That all stays in your pocket and it's to be spent. And then Bolling's with the card, his is a force. I realize people say, well, the cards will be sold for 20 cents on the dollars. Hey, maybe they are and maybe they aren't. But he set up, most of them won't be. He set up a forcing function by having a time. That's the brains of it, the 30 days. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to get back here and maybe give you some blue sky when we return. On War Room Pandemic, live from Capitol Hill, Jack Maxey, Jason Miller, and Stephen K. Bannon. We will return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Episode 60, live from Capitol Hill, John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Voice News, which is the streaming platform of the Trump Revolution, Dish 219. Also at Newsmax TV now at 11 o'clock at night. You can get the replay. And on WABC at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We're everywhere, ubiquitous. There breaking news has the press conference.
Oh, but Governor Cuomo is in his press conference just went to 100% workforce reduction for the state of New York. Shut it down.
I think he's listening to the show too. WABC guys going to be happy.
And that's on top of California. California did it late last night. There's so much news on the show we hadn't even gotten to it.
California. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, California shut down.
Yeah. Oh, wait. But yeah, California shut down. California is in a shelter in place. New York is now in a shelter in place. Steve Bannon, how long until the rest of the country is there?
I think this is why what Mark Short said about the counties and where the focus is. Look, Pennsylvania went first. Pennsylvania's locked down, basically shelter in place.
New York, New Jersey.
Murphy went there. Now you got New York. I think the key here is the country do it? I think it's Ron DeSantis. I think it's Ron DeSantis in Florida. And that's why I told people last night that no Governor DeSantis, some prominent people, I said, look, to me, the best thing you ought to do is get a temperature from DeSantis. If DeSantis in Florida in the situation, and these governors would know best, they got their own analytics, they're getting their own reports from the field labs, they have a sense of what's going on. And here's the thing I want to say. I think the governor of California, Newsom, I think Cuomo, Pennsylvania, these are Democratic governors, but I think they've done things, they've been proactive, got ahead of it. DeSantis, to me, has shown incredible leadership and real potential. People say that guy may be a president in the future. Hey, nobody knows, but here's what I do know. In the current crisis he's in, he's been a steady hand. What he did on the beaches, that's a massive hit to Florida. In those, that is a right. That's as big as March Madness is. The spring break. All of us have been there. It's iconic. When you shut that down, I mean, those hotels just thrive off that. He's taken real leadership. To me, whether the country goes and whether President Trump's got to go, DeSantis is the key that picks a lock. He will know about Florida. And Florida, then I think you had to make the tough call. And this is why Cortez and these guys are saying, if we do that, you need a massive cash infusion today. We can't pass a bill about the first step. That's all fine. That's good. You need a cash infusion today, because if you shut it down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, nothing happens.
Well, I think one to watch also is just Muriel Bowser, mayor here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, big.
And if Washington, D.C., obviously there are things on the
This
city
is kind of shut. I will tell people, this is kind of – I've never seen – look, we've been here since – Andrew and I have been here since 2011. And I'm telling you, on Sunday – and we're right near the Supreme Court. This is where people walk and tourists. Not one physical body passed this house on Sunday. It was like the movie On the Beach, where nobody's alive, nobody's around. So it's quite eerie, even being in the nation's capital today. You have a dedicated workforce of professionals that are showing up to work, but everything else essentially is kind of shelter in place anyway, de facto.
Well, one thing I would say about the shutdowns, and I think this is something that we all have to remember, we're still living in a federal system. That the individual states are the ones who are going to make this decision, and whether people want to believe it or not, the individual states are really the ones who are responsible for saving themselves. They're the ones who should have the supplies. That's why President Trump the other day said, hey, if you guys can get this stuff on your own, you ought to order it. So I think that it's going to be something that's a little bit more rolling. I think that governors have to be pragmatic about how bad the conditions are in their state, because what we're watching right now, you shut down a state, you just took away that state's year's GDP in 2 weeks' time. It's done.
I want to go back to the show, the beginning of the show. Why did we start the show? We started the show for this exact thing that's happening at this moment is the reason we started back in January. What was that? That Hubei province, which is the size of France, with 80 million people in Wuhan, the Chinese authorities in the middle of January were making a thing, and then on the 23rd they pulled the trigger to lock it down and put it in quarantine. And people go, what's this thing? It's just a common cold. I said, hey, I don't know what it is. I got to see in biology. That's not my line of work, but I go to China, and I know what their legitimacy is based upon production, because the whole world's manufacturing base is there. When these brothers shut it down, that means this is big. They quarantined a city the size of New York and shut down a province, locked it down. We had Christopher Balding, the professor from Fulbright University in Saigon, on this show many times. He's the guy that checks he doesn't look at GDP and the math. He gets the physical movement of goods. For 4 weeks, nothing moved in China. Now we're seeing the GDP shrunk by 17% or 20%. Even the way they lie, it's probably zero. Right? I mean, probably they had nothing, but nothing moved. The way they got through this, and we're still not sure they're totally through it, but the way they even got it, that was not a catastrophe that wiped out the nation, is they shut the country down. The Koreans shut the country down. What Italy tried to do was half measures. They tried to shut part of it down, and some cities did it in the north and some didn't. They tried to do Milan, and because they had Fashion Week, some did and some didn't. They didn't do Rome, some did and some didn't. And Italy is now heading towards financial, economic, and societal collapse. The Italian banks are going to fail, okay? The Italian companies are having solvency problems. They're going to fail. The medical system is starting to collapse, and this is because it's half measures, okay? So look, this is not our line of work. We're just showing you what the facts are, and the facts are that people went hard. And I realize, I think the governors have the best feel for this. Cuomo, Newsom in California, DeSantis. And with DeSantis, I think it's important. People say, well, this is politics. He's a Democrat governor. Hey, DeSantis is not. He's a serious person. He's a former naval officer. He's a tough hombre because he won in a tough state, on a tough campaign. He's a decent guy. He will know, and I think he'll be the tell of what we do here.
So on that note, I want to play Mark Short from CNBC this morning, because I then want to debate this point a little bit about should we – I mean, look, let's not sugarcoat it. Should we nationally be going here? Should President Trump be going here in his press conference? Let's play Mark Short.
Governor of California, should that be in any state? I mean, New York has more cases, I think, than California. Is that the future for most places, Mark, in your view?
I don't know, Joe, because I think, again, it's important to keep in mind that we have a federalist system, and it's important to allow state and local communities to do what they think is best for their communities, and us to provide them the resources they need to make the best informed decisions. I do think, though, we do see right now today there are 3 states that have more than 50% of the cases, and there are 10 counties that have more than 50% of the cases, and we have roughly 2,500 counties in the United States. So I don't think that it necessarily will become a one-size-fits-all policy. I think that there's an abundance of caution in some of the policy decisions that have been made to protect more Americans. But as we see better information, which we're getting now in the testing and the rapidity of the spread, it's going to inform whether or not the one-size-fits-all really makes sense.
So I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna say big, bold action. We want to make sure that we're South Korea, not Italy. I know we have a federalist system. I know that technically decisions have to be made at the state and local level.
But let's leave that aside for a second. I want to go to the hardest thing. This is why I said Short should be on TV every day, right? And so a lot of people we know are not Mark Short fans. He's a solid guy, okay? We disagree on a lot of economic stuff. He's a solid guy. Here's the thing. He put out actually – it's a counter-narrative you have to think about. What he's saying, and this is conceptually, and I want to go back to the front page of the New York Times today because they have – and this is where we got to start getting up more maps because this is all about maps and mapping. They actually do the entire nation, right? And they show you where the hot zones are. And so what Short's saying is that when you look at this, and forget the federalist system, everything like that, when you look at it from a practical point of view, this is concentrated – in a number of counties. Now, it turns out those counties are probably the ones we test the most.
That's what I'm going to say is those ones we're testing. And here's the other thing, too. Yeah. If you are – let me see that map right there. Okay, so I'm looking at the front page of the New York Times. Let's go and
This is the failing New York Times, by the way.
Failing New York Times. Let's go and take okay, let's say Nebraska. Nebraska looks pretty good for the most part, right?
Nebraska in the plain states is not too much.
But here's what I'm going to say. Yeah. Do you want to keep looking like that? Okay, then shut it down. Do you want to look like New York? Leave it open.
Well, I'm going to be very much opposed to this. I think we overstate what they did in South Korea. They did not lock down the entire country. They did not lock down the entire country of Japan. They kept the school students open. The factories kept operating. People who had to go to work went to work. Taiwan never even shut down the schools. They just put the whole country on a war footing. For example, in Taiwan, they forced all the parents to take the temperature of their kids and call it in the morning before they took them to school. Taiwan is doing perfectly well right now.
Okay, but hang on a second. You're comparing an apple to an orange. Here's why. In both Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, and in Japan, they had test equipment that worked, and they flooded the zone immediately with testing, massive testing. Okay? We just don't have that here.
We're probably going to be very close to the total number of tests done in Japan by the end of this week, next week. Japan.
That's just not accurate.
We can dispute that. But what I'm saying is,
for the afternoon show, WABC, we'll talk about the numbers. I don't think that's right, but I know you're on top of these numbers more than I am. But I think you're wrong. But I want to just get there. Let's find it. I don't think that's correct.
I think part of the problem is that you have to understand you collapse this entire economy by sending everybody home. You turn off every boiler in the country. It's going to take just as long to get it back up to speed.
I'm not worried about the economy right now. We'll come up with a thing. What I'm worried about, when you go through hell, go through as fast as possible.
You got to have food delivery. You got to have power.
I want to go back to Fauci. What does Fauci tell us?
Let's go to Fauci. First of all, let's go to
one other thing. I talked to a guy last night, actually Burgess Owens. He's running out in Utah last night, and I told him he's one of the guys confused about this. I say one thing and Newsom shutting this thing down, you're going to have guys blowing into Colorado and Utah that say, "Hey, I don't want to be shut down. I'm looking for something's got a little more freedom." So trust me, you're going to be flooded.
I do believe you'll see states close their borders to non-essential traffic.
Okay, this is the point. Then we get into we're back into the look. I come from Richmond, Virginia, right? I've seen, I'm not into independence movements of states. Okay, I saw how that ended. That's my problem. As soon as you do this, you're going to have Colorado, Idaho, Utah, as you should. You're going to start putting up roadblocks from Americans coming into that state.
And they should. We saw this in 1918 over again.
We're all in this together. Shut it all down. Anyway,
right. Let me give you a quick thing. My wife said she's going to the store. Said, "Do I need anything?" We're stocked up, and she's like, "Anything you want me to add to the list?" I said, "Yes, all of it."
All of it. Okay, we're going to hey, this is Fort Apache, and we're here. We're going to return in a moment. War and Pandemic. Hashtag War and Pandemic. Get in the story.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Episode 60. It's Friday, the 20th of March, year of our Lord 2020. We're live from the nation's capital. What President Trump says is nothing is inevitable. That means human action and human agency. And what we've heard from the Trump, inner core of advisors today is go big. Go big on the issues of what you do with controlling this. Go big on the financial side. Go big and go now. Let's go to, it's very important, I think, Dr. Fauci. And here's my question, and I'm not trying to be a wise guy here. Is Dr. Fauci sick?
He definitely has a cold. Or you can tell. I mean, it's just we're going to play the clip.
Now, he's 78 years old, right?
And the other thing, too, the guy's been literally working 20-plus hours a day. He hasn't slept in weeks. Everyone knows. Everyone's gone through that stretch.
He's a warrior.
Whether it be an extreme period of work stress or college finals. Everyone's gone through a stretch, or in the military like yourself, Steve. People have gone through, they literally slept like 1 or 2 hours a night for a couple of weeks, and you know what it does to your immune system. Plus, he's 78. Let me go and play Dr. Fauci. We have a couple of clips. He was on Today's Show from this morning.
Real quick, here's the question that everyone wants you to answer, and I don't know if you can, sir, candidly, but we're all at home right now, including me right now in my basement. How long do you think that Americans need to be in this posture of staying at home and avoiding other people for it to work?
Obviously, that's obviously the question that everyone is asking. If you look at the trajectory of the curves of outbreaks in other areas, it's at least going to be several weeks. I cannot see that all of a sudden next week or 2 weeks from now it's going to be over. I don't think there's a chance of that. I think it's going to be several weeks.
Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to spin that. I mean, but is Jack, go ahead.
I don't know why you're even trying to spin this. We've been 3 months now. We know this. It's going to be several weeks to 2 months.
No, I know this.
That's why you can't shut it all down.
Because the president came out with the 15 days to do it. It's the messaging that I think's wrong. I think Ben Shapiro and those guys also. This is why we put up the Twitter feed of Ben and some of the other guys who follow him. What the point is, if you're telling people it's a couple of weeks, everybody says I can do it for a couple of weeks. But if it's not a couple of weeks, you got to put forward a plan. This is why I wanted to have Bowling and Cortez. They're talking about cash infusions today because it's not going to be a couple of weeks. It could be a month or longer. I think what we're doing is that people just have to come forward and be straightforward. American people can handle anything.
Let's remember, the president said August last week and was deeply criticized. He tanked the market, whatever. That's sober analysis. But he's finally getting the truth.
He's saying, yes, but that was kind of a throwaway line, as it might last that long, right? And then it's gone. It wasn't what their mindset is, and this is why we put the Shapiro thing up, is he's given the kind of framework of 2 weeks, of 15 days.
So here are the numbers. Let's just make sure we're clear on different numbers they've put out there. This is where I think it's important that we get people, like you said, Steve, here's a worst case scenario. Here's what we have to prepare for. We heard some good news yesterday. We're going to play Dr. Fauci's clip where he weighs in on the possible vaccine or the therapeutic treatments. The 15 days to stop the curve, or to slow the curve, or stop the spread, excuse me. So 15 days there. We heard that the peak of this would be somewhere from a month away to 3 months away. Here's some different things, and people might say how much of a peak versus a flattened peak and different things like that. President Trump also said the other day that it could be Whoa, that was a complete Jason fail. I'm your former War Room 2020 correspondent. It's been great being with you guys. But then we also heard from President Trump that it could be July or August until this comes up. And so here's the thing: I think we need to make sure that the way that we keep people both calm and focused, give them the realistic expectation, and make sure that we're making their prepared decisions for those eventualities. That's the thing that I'm saying. I'm not saying sugarcoat it. I'm not saying do doom and gloom. I'm saying be measured. Give people those
Okay,
scenarios.
so how do we walk through that? Look, we used to
Breaking news from New York. I think everybody should hear this. The governor has just now said he wants 100% of all non-essential people to stay at home. And then he reiterated with a second statement. He said, just so we're all clear, this is a statewide order. It's not what your county executive is doing. It's not what your mayor is doing. It's not what anyone else but me is doing, and I accept full responsibility. Blame it all on me.
big shoulders. It's a big deal. And I think this is what people are saying now. Remember, we used to get on people with, we're not trying to panic people. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to give you information. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself, but you have to get the information, but you have to look at it in reality. The biggest enemy is ill-informed complacency. I think I can say now with pretty much, a ton of certainty that there's very little complacency right now. Everybody's taking this that, hey, there's something up here and I got to get focused on this. Now it's to the time of actually how did you take these actions, but also construct the message so people understand exactly what they're supposed to do and kind of the duration. I think what the guys were saying the other day is that, hey, if this is 30 days, I got to know that because my business is not going to be around, or I'm going to not have a job, or I'm, my entire the way I program my life change. If it's a 30 days and that's what it's going to be, and what's the certainty that is, or certainty it's gone after that? Somebody needs to walk me through that, and needs to walk me through that now, because that's a lot different than 2 weeks. And it's not the incremental 2 weeks. Also, when you're at a month, it's like, wow, it's a month, right? And it could go longer. That's, I think, the phase that, and I do think Short was very calming this morning, and I think it was important about this thing of the counties. But I think now it's incumbent upon the White House at stage, and I think they got to check with DeSantis and see where Florida is. And then I think they got to come up, and they got to start, I believe, from the White House, being as bold and as direct as guys like Cuomo.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to go back to the point that I made a moment ago, that we want to, if your community is not being widely affected, there are some parts in the country like Arizona, for example. Arizona is just one place where there just isn't a massive outbreak. That is great. We want to keep it that way. How do we keep it that way? The big, bold action. Look, I look at Governor Andrew Cuomo, someone who, I'd followed. Obviously knew him in politics, or I know his brother Chris personally. But
I was never impressed. I never said this guy. Somebody told me, said this guy's gonna be in the 16th. I said this guy will be one of the first guys out. Just not impressive.
Right. I'm seeing a very measured, grown-up response to how he's approaching these things. For him to say 100% statewide, considering he has Manhattan in the city of New York, he knows where this is going. And I think President Trump, when he's big and he's bold, he's winning, and we're going to have to make these wartime decisions. Wartime decisions mean you got to make some really damn tough choices.
This is the thing about. Let's go back to Arizona. I got family in Arizona, on property out there. Arizona is a fabulous state. If you're locking down California, think of how many people are going to blow into Arizona and say, hey, I'm just going to camp out in Arizona for a while.
That's why the states need to take their responsibility in our federal system to shut their border with California if they want to. But the idea of shutting down a state with 20 cases, because New York State shut it down with 7,000 cases.
Okay, I'm going to lay this out there. If we get to the situation, right, that we're shutting down state borders with state troopers, National Guard, Army Reserve, it's over. You can't do that. It's not conceivable in the way that we think.
Effectively, you already have those border controls in California, Southern California. If you've ever traveled there, you cross the border. I know, but they check you for produce and all that stuff.
They ask you, do you have a flower in your thing? That's not a check. I mean, they do ask you, right? And if you come in with a bunch of flowers in the back, they're going to pull you off to the side. But that's not. You're saying actually seal off a state border from California to Arizona to Colorado to these states.
I think that's going to happen by default. You've got the Outer Banks of North Carolina, right? The county sheriff there on that Outer Banks, he just said, no, we're raising the bridges. Anybody who's doesn't live here can't come in. This is 3 days old. So as I've said many times, individuals are the ones who end pandemics because fear becomes real. And local communities are really the last guideline. I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all for America. Let's remember, we've got spring planting coming up too. We shut down this entire country, and it is not going to be easy to get that engine of state going back. I agree that we need to shut down hotspots. I agree that we need to devote national resources to take care of those. But I don't think that we need to create a panic in Fargo, South Dakota, because New York is on its knees. My opinion.
I'll tell you what's going to cause a panic in Fargo, North Dakota, is when you seal off the North Dakota border, okay? Think about that for a second. You're actually advocating sealing off individual state borders, because once you do that, you're not going to go back. You may do, but I'm saying that construct in the American psyche is something that you're not going to go back from. You can't. That's my point. You can't do that. If you do that, you're going to look. I come from the American South, right? They had a war of independence for the South over slavery and other issues about that. That scar has been around some years, so it doesn't. So you can't. If you do that, you get away from this concept that we're a union. And I understand you got states' rights, you got individual rights, you got all those rights. But if you do that in this situation, I think you're asking for trouble.
Well, if 6 months from now, 18 months from now, according to the NIH, right? Let's say we go back and we look, and you're one of those states that really had no problem, and the federal government came in and destroyed the economy of Iowa to save New York. I'm going to be pretty angry living in Iowa.
The economy's inextricably linked. We're inextricably linked in the national economy. Yes, we have everything's got a different aspect to it, and different service economies and everything like that. But it's so
I've said this many times. A pandemic does not affect every place the same way. And if you look at that map that we held up,
you're right.
It's historical fact. These are transportation hubs that are getting hit the most. You don't have international flights flying into North Dakota, but you do in Denver, you do in Atlanta, you do in the New York region, you do in San Francisco, you do in Los Angeles. And these are where the hotspots are. And they're there because just like the ships coming into Venice in 1648, that's a transportation hub.
Hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want to hear your voice, want to hear what you have to say. This is how upside down this thing's got. I never thought I'd have Steve Bannon arguing for the states to give up any of their rights.
Well, no, but I think the other thing too is let's also talk about the shelter in place, what that means. Now there are going to be some variances, those will be decided at state levels. But if people have to get medicine and have to go to the grocery store, that type of thing, you can go and do that. I mean, what they're doing, and Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically in the UK, or excuse me, not UK, but in, say like Italy, you're going to get hit with like €100 fine if you're out. But it's saying if you need food for your family, if you need medicine, if you are an essential worker, say like a police officer, that type of thing. Obviously, you're going to be able to go and do it. It's not saying you literally can't step the foot outside your house. It's saying you got to stay on your property there. But I think here's the thing.
Stay off my lawn.
Exactly. President Trump has to continue to lead with big, bold leadership. We have to look at where the ball is going and not where the ball is now. Steve, when you started this show on January 25th, when you started talking about this all the way back in December, you and Jack both were months ahead of the curve on anyone else. It was the call for big, bold leadership. Governor Cuomo made that telling point when he was talking to Mike Barbara on New York Times Daily Podcast on Wednesday morning. We're beyond the point of monetizing these safety shutdowns. This is about how many Americans can we save. We cannot forget that.
I completely agree with the governor, but that's particularly true of New York. It is not true of every state in the union, and I think that we don't need to – I mean, first of all, we get into all these troubles always. It comes out in New York, right? The financial collapse even without the COVID-19, and all of us tend to suffer. I don't think it needs to be that way this time, and I don't think it needs to be that way every time.
Okay, let's go to hashtag War Room Pandemic. I have my co-host, Jack the Cracker Maxey. Right, I can't believe you're like some guy from the you're a member of Marion Country Club. I can't believe you're a bigger cracker. You're the complete cracker, but that's okay.
Hey, listen, I bought the dip, Copenhagen long cut, babe.
We're going to take a short commercial break. It's episode 60 in Fort Apache on Capitol Hill. Jason Miller, Jack Max, and Stephen K. Bannon. We're going to return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Episode 60, live from Capitol Hill, the 20th of March, year of our Lord 2020. The President of the United States is about to take the podium at in the Brady Room. They're all coming out right now. I think Secretary Pompeo is there. But I got to tell you, I think my prediction, he's either going to announce we're either going to shut down the country or he's ratcheting this thing up to prepare to shut down the country. This is where it's going. I'm sure he's talked to Cuomo beforehand. Jason, jump in here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. President just took the podium right now, so we're going to...
And Pompeo is going to blow up all over China. The 11-page thing that Seb Gorka talked about, we're going to get that up on the site. It's 11-page thing. This is going to be in China. Look, let's assume it didn't come from the P4 lab. I'm not saying that. I do agree with Cotton. It's all the information's got to come out. But I tell you one thing. They suppressed this information for 60 days, and the reason this thing's blown all over the world is because they suppressed the information and didn't take any action and let this thing get out of control, and the whole world's suffering from it.
100%. In fact, there was a study out of Southampton University in England that came out 2 days ago. These guys are not politicians, and they clearly said that the entire world could have been saved had China told people 2 months earlier.
Okay. President started off with from the lectern saying he had a very good conversation this morning with Senator Schumer from New York, talking about the package that, again, McConnell wants to have done tonight, start debating Friday, have this thing passed by Monday at the latest.
Okay, I think the key thing is how obviously that's all important. You got to talk about the finish thing. You got to keep the markets going. But where we are right now is you've had people got to remember is the 7th biggest economy in the world, and the tech part drives the world. Silicon Valley drives the world into the 4th industrial revolution. New York City is the global capital of capitalism. It is the headquarters. It is the railhead. It is what happens in New York City matters. It matters in every nook and cranny of the world, culturally, media-wise, business-wise, and financial capital markets. It's all out of there.
And I'm sorry. It matters for China, too. There's some stories coming out recently that a lot of the finished goods that come out of China, everything from a refrigerator to a television, requires those little Intel chips and things like that come from China that they plug in the hole and makes the whole thing work. So China's going to be suffering because of this shutdown too.
Okay, we got the President of the United States, and let's try, if we can play Fauci. I want to go back to Fauci if we can. We're going to have other breaking news as the President talks. Mike Pompeo is up there, and Pompeo, as Seb told us, got an 11-page document that goes through the timeline, it goes through their lies, it goes through their misrepresentations. So everybody should understand, and I've been beating on this drum for many, many years, this whole deal with China, the CCP, not the Chinese people, with the Chinese Communist Party, it's getting ratcheted up every day. The information war, the economic war, it's not a Cold War anymore. This is a hot war. Okay.
President's reiterating that temporarily waiving all interest on federal student loans, because that's a small item. He's basically already said that, but that's just where he's at right now. By the way, Phil Mattingly from CNN just tweets out, update as we stand here watching lawmakers shuffle back and forth between the closed rooms, along with the Treasury Secretary and admin officials, in an urgent attempt to reach a deal on $1 trillion-plus package amid escalating unemployment numbers. Yeah, it feels like 2008 now. I would say
the financial crisis.
Yeah, I'd say Phil. That's just the economic part.
Yeah, exactly.
A little late to the party, Phil.
Yeah. I'll let you play Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, let's get to Fauci.
Let's talk about some of these new therapies, new drugs that the president talked about. He said they were exciting, that the FDA has approved them. I'm talking about, I guess, and you can pronounce it better than me, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, which have been used in the past for malaria and for rheumatoid arthritis. First of all, has the FDA approved them for use for this virus? Do they work for this virus? Should doctors just go out on their own right now and prescribe them?
Well, I think the commissioner of the FDA, Steve Hahn, said it very well as the president yesterday, that these are drugs that anecdotally, without being done in a controlled trial, have some suggestion that they might work. We're getting stories from people who've tried them, but they've tried them in trials that are not controlled. So what we're saying is that we want to make them more available, but in the context of a protocol of some sort that would not only make them available, but that we can get some information as to whether they're safe and whether they really work.
So what is that? What does
I
that
don't
really
know.
mean?
Jack, you interpret for me because I'm confused.
All right, here's the thing. Number one, it's more than anecdotal. We have several studies that have shown the efficacy of chloroquine inside South Korea. We also have direct experience with the remdesivir. I know I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. One of our listeners and I have a little dyslexia. But here's the deal. I think that the guy is trying to rationalize this. We're about to do a study of 1,500 people at University of Michigan. They want to create guidelines. You can go out there and read the studies. We'll put them on our site. You guys may as well read them. But the reality is this shows you that I think what they're trying to do is just clamp down the idea of everybody going out and getting chloroquine prescriptions.
Why?
Why? Because there's a limited supply. You want the real tell? Why is it that on, I believe, Monday of this week, it was announced that Bayer was going to be making a donation of 3 million tablets of chloroquine to the United States government as a gift? Are they doing that because we're about to have a malaria epidemic?
No, but you tell okay, so everybody should load up on this stuff.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, look, you know why I don't say that? Because really the sickest people are going to be the ones who are going to need it. And I think that we have to acknowledge that we need to take care of our most vulnerable. This is what I've been saying from day one, and this is why Japan's been successful. This is why Korea's been successful, because they isolated their elderly, okay? And they realized that the rest of the people are going to have to get by as can, because the mortality rates are not likely to affect a 25-year-old the way they're going to affect an 85-year-old.
Okay, the president's up there, I think.
Yeah, he's just going through the federal tax deadline being delayed until July 15th. Still going, but again, Steve, to your point, Pompeo's there. He's going to be saying something. You have Fauci, you have Dr.
I think Pompeo,
Birx.
what I'm hearing is Pompeo is going to talk about closing the southern border, and he's also going to talk about China. So a lot developing. Remember, there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which decades happen. This is the time you're living in now. That's why we're up for we'll be back at 5 o'clock on WABC and all of our distribution platforms, the John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Voice. We're on Newsmax TV now every night at 11 o'clock. We're on Saturdays, 2 hours in the morning. We may be expanding this even more as this crisis, this global crisis now starts to go to another level. New York City, New York State has essentially shut down, joining California. Yes, sir.
Quick shout out for some blue sky later this afternoon. I really want to share some of these amazing emails that we got from Mike Bowen, people all around the country ready to be hands on deck, volunteering to help their fellow Americans.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for 5 o'clock.
Okay, we're going to have some blue sky at that time. And look, we got to have some blue sky. There's sunlit. The sunlit uplands are before us because of human action. As Donald Trump says, nothing is inevitable. This is the War Room. We'll see you at 5 o'clock on WABC and everywhere else. See you then.